Peace be with you. Welcome to another collective worship. Let's get ready for a time of reflection, and I'll light the virtual candle. So if you're ready, I've got a story to share with you. A story about someone who wanted to use their power and authority to make sure that they got their own way. And they didn't really care what happened to the people who got hurt. So let me introduce you to Naboth. Now Naboth, he owned a vineyard. He loved being in his vineyard, watching the grapes grow, pruning the grapevines. And one day he hoped that his children would enjoy his vineyard as much as he did. But this is King Ahab. Now, you might be able to tell from his face, he was a bit cross and grumpy. And he didn't really care about other people at all. And one day, he looked out from the tallest tower of his palace and looked down, and he noticed down there a little bit of land with some grapevines growing on it. You've guessed it, Naboth's vineyard. And King Ahab thought to himself, that's right next to my palace. That would be really convenient. So I could grow vegetables in it. That would be good. I think I want that vineyard all for myself. So he hurried down and went to find Naboth in the vineyard. Sell me your vineyard straight away. I want it for myself. Now, Naboth had heard about King Ahab and his temper and how horrible he could be. So he sort of cringed and said, I'm really sorry, but this vineyard is my inheritance from God, and I'm going to pass it on to my children when they're old enough to look after the vines. I can't sell it to you. King Ahab was really furious. He stomped off and clenched his fists and screwed up his face because he was so cross. And then he flopped into his bed, and just like a little 2-year-old child, he had a sulk. Now this is Queen Jezebel. Now, you might not be able to tell from that smile, but she wasn't very nice either. She was scheming and didn't care who got hurt in her schemes. She had heard King Ahab stomping about the palace and flopping in the bed, heard that he was sulking and wouldn't eat his dinner. So she came up to see what was wrong. He said, I want that vineyard that belongs to Naboth. It's right by my palace. It would be really convenient to grow my vegetables in. I want it. Queen Jezebel just smiled one of her crafty, sneaky smiles, said, don't get your knickers in a twist. I'll sort it out. So she had a plan, a sneaky, cunning plan. She wrote some letters pretending to be King Ahab. She even put his official sign on the letters. And then she went round and gave them to the officials across the whole country. The letter said, I want you to declare a special day of fasting and put Naboth in the seat of honour. And then I want you to bring in some troublemakers to tell lies about Naboth. Well, the officials were very worried when they saw that. They knew that wasn't a good thing to do. But they also knew about Queen Jezebel and her schemes, and King Ahab and his bad behaviour, and they were really scared. They didn't want to stand up to them at all. So they did what was said in the letters. They declared a day and put Naboth in the seat of honour, and then brought 2 troublemakers in to tell lies about Naboth. They made up all sorts of stories about Naboth, and that got all the people at this special day so cross that they believed the lies that had been told about Naboth, and they threw rocks and stones at him. Now Jezebel was delighted. She heard that Naboth had been killed and ran to see King Ahab. "The vineyard's yours," she said. "Naboth is dead. You can take the vineyard, and you don't even have to pay for it now." She was delighted. And King Ahab went back up to the top of his tall tower and looked down and thought, I do like the look of my new vegetable garden. Now then, this is someone else in our story. His name is Elijah. And Elijah listened very carefully to God. And God said, "Go and see King Ahab." So Elijah went off and found King Ahab in his new garden, in what was Naboth's vineyard. King Ahab was delighted with the way things had worked out. He'd got his own way. But Elijah said, "God has been watching you. He's seen what you and Queen Jezebel and your family have been doing. He's seen how badly you've behaved." King Ahab was furious. "You're always giving me bad news. You're always telling me what I can't do. You're just causing trouble." But Elijah wasn't afraid of King Ahab. Elijah knew that God was on his side. And Elijah said, "God's been watching you, and he's going to punish you and your family for what you've done." Ahab was worried now. Just like many bullies, he didn't want to stand up to someone more powerful than him. He was very scared. And then he began to think about Naboth and Naboth's family and what had happened to them, all because he had wanted his own way and wanted the vineyard. And then King Ahab began to feel very sorry for what he'd done. He tore his royal robes and he refused to eat to show how sorry he was. And so God saw this too. God saw that Ahab was sorry for what he'd done, and he gave Elijah another message. "Go and tell King Ahab that the punishment won't come in his lifetime, because I've seen that he's sorry." So you can find that story that we've just listened to in the first book of Kings, 1 Kings in the Old Testament, which is the first bit of the Bible before the time of Jesus. So the first book about all the kings of Israel and Judah. And it's chapter 21 if you want to read it for yourself. Now, in the story we heard, King Ahab and Queen Jezebel were really rather unkind and mean. In fact, I think I would say that they were horrid. They didn't think about other people. They didn't think about how much Naboth enjoyed working in his vineyard. They didn't think about how sad Naboth's children would be if Naboth was hurt. They didn't think how the officials would be uncomfortable doing something that they knew was wrong. They didn't have any compassion. They didn't understand what other people were thinking and feeling. And it was only when Elijah was courageous and told by God to go and tell King Ahab how awful he'd been, that King Ahab began to have any feeling for others. And then he was sorry for what he'd done. He understood that it was wrong. So today's assembly is really a story about what not to do. You're not to act like King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. It's about acting like Elijah and being courageous and thinking about others. So I'm going to finish with a short prayer. If you'd like it to be a prayer, you can say Amen at the end. But if you don't like prayer or you're not sure about prayer, then you could just use the words for reflection, and that's okay. Thank you for people who are courageous and compassionate, like Elijah, who challenge when people do things wrong and show the way that we should act. Be with us. Help us to look after others, to care for people, and to do the right thing. Help us to be compassionate. And if we're worried about what is going on, and we're concerned that people are being mean, show us the grown-ups to tell, the teachers or people in our family that will help put it right and help us to be courageous and compassionate like Elijah. Amen. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.